Hey everybody! Today we're joined by Beatriz Rodriguez-Satizabal. She originally taught in the UK, but right now is doing that from Colombia. We discussed teaching from a different time zone and educating a diverse classroom. Next to that, her research is in the history of business groups. She links economic theory to the history of entrepreneurship and business. Why are business groups important? And why are they so common in Latin America? We dive deep into her research and welcome you to the conversation too. Hey Beatrice, thank you so much for making the time to talk to me. What have you been up to?
Hi, Julika. I've been up to finishing to complete submitting my thesis, preparing for my viva that is coming in 2 weeks, and thinking about Peruvian business history and economic history because I am going to work there. And also, I've been spending some time with my parents as for the last 10 years I was living in the UK and I came back because of the pandemic. So I am enjoying this time with my parents as a child again.
That's pretty great. How was it to move back from the UK?
Actually, there has been no difference at all because I haven't been out in Bogota too much, only to run errands or to buy groceries. The rest I have been at home because I am still teaching for Queen Mary University. I am teaching online and I am doing everything online. So there is not been a change since the lockdown started in London in March. And to the point today that is almost the end of the year and I am still at home doing everything from home. I see the mountains of Bogota from the window, so everything looks beautiful, but that's it.
So, what is it like to teach from home?
It's been a challenge. Actually, I had experience before teaching private sessions online to individual students that wanted to revise economics. But I found that teaching to groups larger than 20 online, it means more work for us as lecturers or seminar leaders. I think I've been working 3 or 4 times more than what I actually do when I go to the classroom. Also, it's been a challenge to have these sessions that you don't see the faces of your students. You only see the black boxes from MS Teams, which is a completely different experience in terms of teaching because in my case, as I am a Colombian that uses face and hands gestures lots and I've been used to teach to students in higher education in the UK that are from different countries. One of my of the key issues that I have is that when I go into the room, I can read the faces of the students, and online I cannot do that. So I have to expect that they are understanding and that they will ask at some point in the webinar. But if they don't do, I am just left with the feeling that they just either they were not there at all in the in the session. They just opened their phones to for the attendance list, or they are actually paying attention and we are doing it so well that there are no questions. So it's been tricky.
So, before COVID, you would teach a group of students from all over the world. How was it to teach different cultures, different backgrounds together in one class?
So I was teaching for the first years in the School of Business and Management for first years, third years, and master students. The first years, usually they are from different backgrounds. More, let's say, if you divide it in percentages, 20% are British, another 20% are Europeans, and the other is a mix of Asian students. It is quite I was teaching accounting. I am teaching accounting still. I'm teaching accounting and quantitative methods for first year students that have first different levels of maths knowledge. Some of them, usually the British or the Asians that have studied here, the highest here, sort of in the UK, the A levels, they have a background in economics or in business studies because they took the A levels in those two courses. So I had to compensate the fact that some of them knew economics, maths, or business studies with others that clearly it was their first time learning any of the key concepts that we were teaching them. So it is a challenge, and it's always going to be a challenge because you need to, for the first years, you need to balance those type of students and see how to approach them in a way that they can understand the discussion. In the case of the third years, I was the seminar leader for a module on macroeconomic policy. It was very interesting because the majority of the students, it's an elective, so the majority of the students were Europeans and British. Because so yes, it was a completely different challenge because they bring examples always from their countries. So what I try to do always is to compensate, to balance the different examples. So examples from Latin America, examples from Africa, and examples from Europe and from the US, because the topics were unemployment, inequality, poverty, and and the in the topic of inequality, it gives you the chance to discuss other regions of the world. So it was more interesting discussion. And in the case of the masters, the module was quantitative methods. And yes, as it was a mix again of students, but different from the undergrads, the master students do have a background in economics and in statistics, which facilitates the teaching.
Okay. So how did you get there? What was the road from your economic education to teaching at Maryland, Queens? No, what was it called?
Queen Mary.
Queen Mary. Okay.
Queen Mary University. So I studied economics in Colombia, in Universidad de los Andes, which is is a private university, one of the largest in the country. This one is a university that was founded in the late 40s. And it's a university in which economics was taught when I was a student back in the late 90s. It had a very neoliberal approach. And the education, it was to focus on the career either in the public sector to work with the government. All of our the great majority of our professors were in the government, or to go into the private sector, to the financial institutions, or to big companies, big consultant companies. That was like the career profile that you have after finishing economics. I was a little bit different because my interest for economics started because my father is a businessman. He's an entrepreneur, And in 1998, when I was going to start university, there was a financial crisis here in Colombia, which affected my father. And I was in between studying business or studying economics, but I decided I'm going to study economics because I want to understand why there are crises and why it affects individuals like all the entrepreneurs and the companies. So that was my approach to economics. Right at the end of my third year, um, I took a module on business history, on Colombian business history, and and right there I found out that I could link all the theory that I learned in economics with the history of entrepreneurs and the history of business. And I moved to work with a newspaper. So I moved so I started to work in a newspaper in an economics and business newspaper, which was only founded in 1993. So when I started to work with them, it was they have been publishing a daily newspaper only for 10 years. So I started to work there, and I was linking again everything in my economics career with the reality of business. And while I was doing that, I was still working. I was working for the university, but not for the economics department. I was working for the School of Management. I was a teaching assistant for Carlos Davila, who is the pioneer of business history in Colombia. So I helped him in the modules that he used to teach in the executive MBA. So I kept like this, working for the newspaper and working as a teaching assistant for 3 years, and then the university offered me if I wanted to start an academic life. Under Carlos Davila as my mentor and as a member of the research group History, Entrepreneurship and Business of Universidad de los Andes. And then part of becoming an academic was to decide on my master and my PhD. So I moved to the university. I started to teach business history and a module that was called Colombia y sus instituciones. So it's Colombia and its institutions, if I translated literally, but it was a little bit of history of Colombia plus the perspective of new institutionalism. So how rules of the game are important for the development of a country.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I decided to go to the UK to study economic history at the LSE. So I did my master at the LSE. And then I lived there after the master. I lived there for another few years, in part, and then I started my PhD at Queen Mary. But I moved from economics and I moved from history to do a PhD in business and management. Because actually business history is a discipline that is either under economic history or is in management schools. So business history started in Harvard Business School with Alfred Chandler, they have the business history unit, and it has a spread around the world. So I moved to a school of business and management because my research interest is business groups, and business groups is a very specific organizational structure or ownership network that it's mostly seen in emerging countries. And for the last 14 years, that has been my research interest. So business groups and how they are important in economies that are emerging. So I moved. I am almost done with the PhD. So that's why I have this teaching experience that involves economics modules, but also business modules. But
So,
but I define myself as a business historian.
so what is the big difference or differences between business history and economic history then?
Well, you can say that business history is more focused on the history of entrepreneurship, the history of companies, and the history of industries. So it brings the analysis into a more micro level. Economic history is a more macroeconomic level. So economic history considers finance history, it considers inequality, it also considers changes in the growth patterns of the countries, and it considers the industry more from the point of view of the aggregate level. So we're going to study the textile industry, but it is the aggregate level. And that's, let's say, in topics I will say that's the difference. And in terms of the methodology, I think that's the other big difference between between economic and business history. Economic history tends to be more quantitative. Business history tends to be more qualitative or mixed methods. The similarity comes into the fact that we are using economics and organizational theory as part of the discussion. And the other similarity, I will say that we both economic and business historians we use archives. So it's the collection of information to answer questions regarding the evolution and the patterns of development. So yes, I will say those are the difference and the similarities between both.
So
Yeah.
did it teach you the crisis that when your dad's an entrepreneur, like did it teach you about the crisis as well, how that happens, or how does it relate to that in Colombia?
Yes, actually, it's very interesting because what I study is the reaction of the firms or the government of the companies or the government of the entrepreneurs to changes in the context. Yeah,
What do you mean?
I believe that business history gives you the chance to have a natural experiment of what is happening, what happened, and how uh, companies and business and entrepreneurs react to changes in the context. Changes in the context, such as if there is a change in the economic model from, for example, protectionism to neoliberalism. So how the companies and the entrepreneurs react. And in the case of my father and everything, what it happened was like I managed to understand the reasons of the crisis. So the macroeconomic reasons of the crisis, changes in interest rates, changes in inflation, the government approach, so the government policy, and then to understand that there are strategies that that business can take to react to these changes. And in the case of the business groups, clearly what I have seen in my study is that business groups is a way to react to the changes in economics, in the macroeconomic, because business groups allow the businessman, the business owner, to adapt the structure. So, for example, if there is a crisis that the one that we are living now, well, not full crisis, but yes, we're in the middle of changes in the economy. What you can see in the business groups is that they can close some of the companies, and they can wait until the economy improves to open to invest in other industries. So what you have is that the reaction is diversification. So diversifying is a way to react to the context, to turbulent context, and that happens in emerging countries. So what happens in Colombia is that since the late 19th century, entrepreneurs have reacted to violence, to political changes, to economic changes by adapting the way that by adapting their diversification. So they increase their investment in sectors that are in different sectors, or they decrease or they close their investments in sectors according to what is happening in the economy. And I think that that is a point of view that fits the studies in macroeconomics, that is fits the studies in development, and helps you to understand where to go in terms of policy.
So are business groups a thing of emerging economies mostly?
Yes, so business groups, well, not mainly, business groups are the examples that you can think on the top of that will always come on the top of your head as business groups will be the ones in Japan and Korea. So think about Samsung. Samsung is an example of what is a business group. And a business group is basically an ownership network in where a family of a group, or a group of regional entrepreneurs, or a group of owners that have similar values or cultural values, they own firms in different industries. Or if you think about the literature that you have read in your economics studies, is what in the American literature, sorry, in the US literature is called conglomerates. So the thing that distinguishes them in the emerging economies is that they have persisted in time. In the developed world, so let's say in the US, in the UK, in Germany, they tend to disappear and become big corporations. In the emerging economies, they persist and they keep growing and growing and growing, because it's a way to accumulate capital and to maintain the family as the owners. Remember that in emerging economies, family ownership is quite important. More than 75% of the companies in Colombia are family owned, and that happens across the Latin American countries, and it happens also in, for example, Taiwan, Turkey, or Vietnam, just to name some examples.
Why is that important?
Sorry?
Why is it important for the businesses to be family businesses?
Because of the growth. I have to go back. Family ownership there has been a discussion in the literature about family ownership because Chandler uh, explains for the case of the U.S. that the U.S. moved from family capitalism to managerial capitalism. Yeah. But in countries, in emerging countries, it's been shown that family ownership still matters. And the literature on family businesses has explained and has shown in different cases around the world how families persist as the main owners, and mostly in countries where capital markets are very weak. So family is important in business because they are they move a generation after generation into increasing the size of the firm, or increasing, in the case of in the case of what I studied, the increasing the size of the business group. And they use their network capabilities, they use their reputation to keep their market power and the market share. So actually, family, and if you think about also not only in the small and medium enterprises, small and medium enterprises are family owned. So that's why family is quite important to think about always family as part of the economic agents in an economy.
Oh, okay, because I was wondering, because you said that like these business groups get really big, but then in like North America or Europe, they would turn into big firms. But they're in Latin America, for example, they stay business groups. What
Yes,
makes that difference?
and also think about the case of the Scandinavian countries. So Norway, Sweden, they also have business groups, and the business groups are actually big, and they are
Really?
already multinationals. Yes,
Why do they
yes.
then keep business groups? What makes them different?
I truly think is I truly think is how family matters in the business. So if family grows generation after generation, the business groups gives the family the capacity to increase the size of the business by increasing the number of companies and the number of industries where they are investing. And it also allows to create this network of owners, which means that uh, if the third generation it has 10 new members, and these 10 new members want to also be want to also invest in the economy, they create companies, and then this also creates, from the sociological point of view, this also creates interconnections and between families. Like, family of one business groups, one member of one business group gets married with a member of another business group, and that consolidates this ownership network. And in the case of many countries, including, for example, the case of Japan and Korea and Brazil, business groups are promoted by the government. So
Okay.
business groups are seen as a way to move the resources, capital and managerial and material resources from across industries, and to improve the efficiency in the industries. And in many cases, business groups are a way to reduce the uncertainty in the industries. For example, in the case of Brazil, um, during the 1970s and 1980s, many of the groups, so the government used a special credit loans, special loans for the directed to the business groups, as a way to help industries that were lagging behind. So that's the case in many countries. In the case of Colombia, that didn't happen, not as direct as the case of Japan, Korea, and Brazil. Uh, Business groups were more, the government let them be, let them grow. However, the owners, or the members of the family in the of the business groups were always in this revolving door between the private sector and the government. So this is a political capability that is unique to families and unique to elites, and it's reflected in both the way how they approach politics and the way how they approach business.
Interesting. So, were business groups always studied in Colombia? Is that a new thing, or have they been studied as much as they have been in like the US or the UK?
Uh, the case of Colombia, it's very, it's yeah, it's wonderfully strange because during the 1970s, no, during the, yeah, business history is a new discipline. Yeah, in the case of Colombia, uh, only in the late 70s it started to, in the late, sorry, in the late 80s it started to began this movement to study business history. So usually what you, the studies that you find before the mid 80s were either commemorative stories of companies, or of the largest companies, or studies from the 70s from journalists that call the business groups the owners of the country. So basically, it was this left look at capitalism. So everything that goes wrong with capitalism is the fact that we have a concentration of ownership in the country. So they highlighted some of the examples of the business groups of the owners, but never went into understand the strategies or the structure of the business group. It was just the speech of they are the owners of the country. There is no democratization of ownership. Then between mid 1970s and mid 1990s, the world was, Colombia was completely quiet regarding the business groups. Uh, Part because of the debt crisis in Latin America. Another part because the 1980s, business groups were growing and the largest companies were growing and the economy was doing relatively well compared to other Latin American countries. So although the 1980s were the lost decade of Latin America, Colombia was doing well. Yeah. So then with the trade liberalization in the 90s, there is when people starts to take a look on business groups. But the focus has always been in the six largest business groups, and this obviously is a bias because there are not only six business groups. There are, I found 25 for the period of 1950 to 1980. And there is another study that shows that at the end of 2013 there were 96 groups. So business groups are dominant in the Colombian economy. So if I want to say that I have innovated, that if I done any innovation with my research, my innovation is that I am studying, instead of studying one case study or the six largest business groups, I just went back and organized the information for 25 business groups and thought about two strategies: the diversification strategy and the financial strategy. So how they finance their investment during a certain period. Uh, yeah. So, but in general, if you ask me about how many people studies business groups in Colombia, we are a very small group, less than 15.
So
And in number of publications, there are only 38 studies on business groups, which is
wow.
very small for the for the number of business groups that we have.
Why is it so small?
Well, you know that Colombia is a country that is a very turbulent country. So, so the fear of kidnapping is part of the culture of not showing, of not giving access to historians to the archives. And in 1976, no, 1976, yeah, the one of the control agencies of the government published a book about 16 business groups, and during the whole 1980s and 1990s, that book was it was called across the country as the kidnapper's manual, the kidnapper's guide.
What?
So yeah, so between 1975 and, let's say, the end of the 90s, um, yeah, there were restrictions from both the government and the companies to get access into the archives, and I think this make difficult the study of the business groups or the firms. Also, as I said, it's a very recent discipline. Business history is a very recent discipline. So yeah, only until the late 90s people started to get interested into study the evolution of companies, and how how the evolution of these companies is related with with the economic development. And I think that's another point that makes business history interesting, is that uh, as I said, we go to the level of the companies and the entrepreneurs to understand what is their role in an economy. So, do they, when they take decisions and when they do strategies, are they having an impact on economic growth or not? Are they having an impact on the society? Is there any impact on economic development? I think that's something that we do from taking a look of the side of the evolution of the company.
So why was the book so badly received, or why?
Oh, because it has names. So it has the names of the board of directors of the largest companies in each group.
Okay.
And it only showed the financial information of 1 year, of 1974. It shows the financial information, but in a country that was in the 1960s, the first guerrillas started. So we have the FARC and ELN started in the 60s, and then in the late 70s we start these the drug cartels started in the late 70s. And remember that these both guerrilla and well, remember now because you don't know, sorry. So both guerrilla and drug cartels is they dominated illegal markets and they increased violence in the country. So it was the fear of, to whom am I going to give the information, how the information is going to be used. And basically the decision of the government was, this is the first and the last time that we're going to publish something like that, contrary to what happens in Japan and Korea, where this information, the same information, is produced yearly. So if you want to research in your future, if you want to research business groups in Japan and Korea, you will find directories of the business groups that have all the information about the business groups, the name of the manager, where did the person study, how the assets, so information on the company and information on the managers and owners. So in Colombia, that was not possible because of who is going to use the information and and I don't want them. I don't want the illegal actors to know my assets and what I do. Yeah, and that happened. That kept going. It's been now managed because government because of the change in the accounting regulations, in the accounting standards around the world. So now the companies need to need to make some information public, and also because we signed the peace process in. So I think that that is bringing back this interest to know the evolution of companies. Also, more companies have opened their archives in the last 10 years.
Why?
So yes,
Why have they opened up now? What
I think
changed?
it's trust, trust, trust. First, yeah, trust. First, the trade liberalization meant a change in regulations. Because in order to attract more foreign direct investment and in order to increase joint ventures and greenfields, more information is needed. If you want to attract foreign direct investment, you need to give information up as a company. Yeah, so regulations change. Second, the illegal actors have been reduced. So we have the drug cartels are now less powerful than before 1995, and we have signed the peace agreement. And also, I think I will say that a third factor is that the largest Colombian companies are becoming multinationals. So they are part of this group called multi-Latinas, that is multinational from Latin America, that are moving around the region, but also they are moving to Asia and the US. And those markets request information. If you want to reach one of those markets, you will need to give information. And also, I will say that, well, possibly this is something that I am saying after not being living here for 10 years. So please. I think there has been because in 1993, between 1993 and 1997, there was a movement to have newspapers and magazines specialized in business and economics. I think part of this openness is a result of we want to be part of the rankings. We want to be shown in the rankings. We want interviews. So it's part of reputation too. So yeah. So which is very good for me as business historian. No, no complaints here.
But you said that business history is like a new field. Where did it come from? How did it start?
So business history started with Alfred Chandler in Harvard Business School, and from his study on DuPont, it moved into studying the evolution of business across the U.S. and then it spread around the world. And it spread basically what happened with Chandler and Harvard was like it gave it opened different questions, different from the ones that economic history used to have before Chandler, that were more related with the industry and with the industries, and it gave a structure to the discipline business history. And then it moved to the UK and across Europe, and then it came down to Latin America. And in Latin America, it's very interesting because the pioneers were mainly researchers from the US or the UK. So, for example, just to mention some, Rory Miller in Peru, um, Roger Brew in Colombia, just to mention some cases. And this was during the 70s. So during the 70s, Latin America was yeah, Latin America was having a structuralism, so theory. During the 70s, Latin America was showing theory, so Latin American scholars were working on theory. And this attracted researchers from the US and the UK, and that basically was the open door for business history. And then in the case of Colombia, Carlos Davila and Enrique Ogliastri followed the studies in business history. Interestingly, none of Carlos Davila is not an economist. He is an engineer with a PhD in organizational theory, and his research was on elites. And from his study on elites, he came to business history. So as you can see, the business historians, we come from different backgrounds. We use mixed methods, and we then do the studies on business.
So how was it for you to come from economics into business? Because I know that economists have their prejudices about business related research and subjects. So how was it as an economist to move into that field?
That's a very good question. uh, for me, was great. As I said at the beginning, my interest in economics was to uh, came from trying to understand the relationship between what happened to entrepreneurs and what happens with the economy in general. Um, so first, the move the it was business departments are more open to business history, are more open to understand to understand the company, and to understand the owner and the entrepreneur. Second, it was a complete change in methodology. So so that was a challenge, because it's moving from using econometrics and being from using econometrics to explain everything, to use qualitative information. But because of my interest and because of my career as working in a newspaper and working and studying some business during my undergrad, I feel more comfortable using mixed methods and bringing the story to the statistics. Yeah, and I don't trust fully in the coefficient, and I yeah, I question the coefficient lots. Uh, so I think that was very good. However, I need to say that for me it's been very surprising how economists are now moving into business schools.
What do you mean?
So yeah, so in Queen Mary University, in the School of Business and Management, the people with whom I work, they are economists, pure economists who use applied economics to explain the world. So, and if I come to the university here in Colombia, the School of Management has hired in the last 5 years more economists that use quantitative methods and behavioral economics. So I think economists are moving into business schools. Yeah, contrary to what you expect from an economist that is not going to a business school, I think they are moving. So I did that movement in 2006, so 14 years ago. But it seems is now a normal tendency of economists.
Why do you think that
And
is?
what I love, what I love about being in a business school, the different approaches that you can see in a business school, because you will have people, staff that are sociologists, you have a staff that are economists, you have a staff that is historians, anthropologists, etc. So that's something that only happens in a university. If you work for a university, it only happens if the university has many departments. But in the case of the business schools, because the history behind business schools, you will find a world complete from different disciplines right there in your department. So you can have you can you can use this multidisciplinarity to understand from different perspectives your studies, and I think that's great from working in business schools.
So how
Um,
has that helped you, that multidisciplinary?
uh, first, uh, first, it helped me in terms of my research. It helped me to identify a different unit of analysis. So it's not only the business groups, it's also each of the group affiliated firms, but it's also the family that is behind it. I think that if I kept my perspective as an economist, I will only take a look on either the firms or the business group, but never thought about the structure of this unit of analysis. And also, my approach to history was because I was in a business school, and I think that came from there. Yeah, and for example, now that I am going to Peru to work for for another university, uh, I am I can yeah, I can see like the forest is going to be the social sciences. The trees is going to be my research on the relationship between real variables and financial variables. Uh, so I think that's why in my career the business school was actually truly helpful to feed my knowledge and to feed my research on economics, because I am still doing economics. Yeah, I'm still studying the black box of the company. But I am taking a more historical approach, basically meaning taking a long-term view. But I am using some quantitative methods. So yes, I am at the bottom of my heart. I am still an economist, but I bring perspectives from other disciplines to my research.
Yeah, because I was going to say, how does that work together? The black box of the firm and then the whole story of the family behind it? How does it even match?
Yeah, that much because of the uh, perspective of uh, someone founded the film. It's like the egg and the chicken. Someone created the film. The company does not exist just by itself. So there is someone holding the company together, and in order to understand bigger topics such as inequality, for example, you need to understand what is the impact of the companies and the concentration of ownership on the society. So yes, that's
Wow,
holding it
that's a
together.
big question as well. Damn.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big question that I hope I will do in the future years to try to understand the impact of this ownership on inequality. because as I said, it's the chicken and the egg.
That's
There
pretty
are owners
interesting.
of businesses, and there is a society that is impacted by the businesses. If you think about the big topics in the world now, you have environmental discussions, you have discussions on corporate social responsibility. So we as economists, we need to move on from the black box to try to understand what is behind all the decisions that companies take. So a company takes a decision to be environmentally friendly, not only because it's the government pushing or because it's the society requesting it, it's also because it comes from the owners, from the board of directors and the owners, on how they are going to increase their market power or by any decision that they take.
Interesting. Okay, so with every guest, we do a little lightning rounds. So
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you a question, and you just say the first thing that comes up. Okay.
Okay.
All right. What is a skill any economist should learn?
Skill, critical thinking.
Who do you admire or look up to in economics?
In economics, recent or
You pick.
I admire. Wow, I pick recent. I admire the works of Masukato. I think what she is doing by questioning the value of things and the value of everything is quite important to understand better the impact of any economic activity. Let's say I admire her.
What is
And
it?
I also admire, I admire from the old ones. I admire Gerchenkron.
Who's
I
that?
admire Gerchenkron. So he's a Russian economist who moved to the U.S. And he was part of the developmentist theory, and he basically makes the call of let's try to understand what happens in terms of finance and what happens with the growth of the countries, and he brings the entrepreneurs and the companies into the mix. And I think although we have, it has been proved that there are some mistakes in his research, but although I think that he put the word out. And the third one that I admire is Mark Casson. I like Mark Casson work.
Why? What does he do?
He studies the entrepreneur, and he brings the economic history. He binds together economic economic theory and the entrepreneur. So I admire him.
What is a question you want me to ask that I haven't asked you yet?
I think you can be curious about why, after being so long in Europe, I want to come back to Latin America. In terms of the research, I think that could be a good question to answer.
Well, do I want to know the answer? I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. What would be the answer to that?
I know if you don't want to know it. No, I think I think Latin America has still many things to study, but also how the turbulence of Latin America makes very interesting trying to understand how businesses react to the context. There is no standardization of legislation across the region like it happens in Europe. Like, you have standards because of the European Union, and you have macroeconomic stability that is a result of this union. Latin America does not have that. And yeah, after being so long in Europe, I think it's time to come back and see what else, if I find any other explanation for this uncertainty in the market.
Because do you have different access to knowledge, being like from the UK and from Latin America, or why is it important to study from different countries?
First, the challenge now is that I am moving from studies about Colombia to movies about to studies about a different country that is Peru. And this will allow me to do some comparative analysis between two countries that are actually more similar than what economists and economic historians have realized. The population, in terms of size, the population is very similar. In terms of the economic models, it's also very similar. And comparative analysis, it's very difficult to do it between Latin America and Europe, because Latin America has less stability than Europe, and the policy changes in both regions. So also the access to information is better if you are here than if you are in Europe trying to study Latin America. Yeah.
So is it a good thing, according to you, that Europe has the same regulations for the whole EU, or is it better to have like different regulations per country, like they have in Latin America?
I think that in terms of businesses, and I think standards are important, and I think what the European Union has done in terms of, for example, standards on quality of the products and standards on the use on how to use the technology and how to register innovations and patterns. And I think it's important to it's important to allow firms to keep growing, to allow companies to keep growing, and to keep not only increasing their market power in the domestic markets, but also to extend their activities around the world. So I think that's something that the European Union is a great achievement in terms of the business system. Also because it has the standards that the European Union have created are gives more information to competition. So firms are more competitive because they have more information available about prices, about quantities, about quality. In the case of Latin America, I think one of the barriers to enter, one of the barriers that businesses have is that first is very costly to create firms. The standards change across countries. So foreign direct investment from businesses in Latin American countries is quite tricky sometimes because there are no standards at all. Not even there are some countries that they don't even have standards because legislation keeps changing. So I think that certainty that the European Union gives in terms of trade, in terms of innovation and patents, and in terms of quality and service, I think it's been very important for the development of the European business system. Can we reach that in Latin America? We have tried many times to have a union, a trade union at least. We have the example of Mercosur, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Chile. They haven't reached the full standards as the European Union. Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Peru try to have another union, another regional agreement, but it didn't went well. because obvious of the political changes, Chavez, of all the political changes in the last years. And if you read, there is a really good book about business groups in Central America by Benedict Bull and other authors. They do mention how if there was a stronger trade union between the countries in Central America, the companies will be growing faster. So, but that's a matter of the standards. Obviously, the European Union is not perfect, and there are issues that need to be improved. But in terms of business and the business system, I think that the standards are actually good.
Okay. So what are things that you need to have a good trade policy, like business-wise between countries? What are like the baseline things you need to have to make it work?
Yeah, I'm just going to give you some examples. Agreement on, so for example, consumer service. How the government agencies react to consumer complaints. That is something that the European Union has standardized for all countries. In Latin America, many countries are just in the last 20 years started to have this consumer service legislation. So they started to protect the consumers very late. And I think that a standard for all the region will be ideal for businesses to know how they need to react to customers. Another one is the uh, how to register new businesses in the countries. There are studies that already show that the more costly the registering a business is, and in terms of time and price and value, the less economic growth is going to happen in the country, because companies are new companies, small and medium-sized businesses, increase investment and increase economic growth in a way. And in Latin America, we don't have those standards. Uh, so legislation is messy across countries, and it makes more costs. It increases the cost for new businesses. And also the third one, I will say investment. If for investors, if you are a foreign investor and you know that that if you come to one of the countries in Latin America, you will have access to the rest of the countries. It will be more interesting, the investment. It will reduce the risk of the investment, because if something goes wrong, you can move to any other country. For investors, it's very difficult to do that in the Latin American market, because each country has different legislation. So there are no standards at all in foreign direct investment. So I think that those could be the three examples in which uh, standards for the whole region will help will help businesses. And remember that the big movement that I mentioned, that the big movement since 2003, 2005, is that the largest business in Latin America are moving to other countries. So they are becoming multinationals. Um, they know they are moving first to their neighbors, but imagine this how fast will be this growth if instead of them adapting to each country's legislation, they just go across every single country. So
Yeah, that would go a lot quicker. Interesting.
yeah,
Okay. So, what does the future of economics look like according to you?
according to me, okay. Okay, I think from what I have seen in the last 5 years. I think, and I am very happy because of that, we are moving to be more inclusive as economists, to be more inclusive in terms of the gender of the academics. So women, we are being more included, but also in terms of the topics that we are studying. So we are bringing again, we are bringing back this concern about society. Yeah, I think the economics bit in during the 90s and the early 2000s, uh, it was just very mild into the research about the impact in society, and now we are back into thinking about uh, inequality as a big issue, to think about environment, and surprisingly, economists are being hired now not only as academics, but they are, or in the financial industry, they are only being now hired by, for example, oil companies to use their skills to think about uh, energy, for example, sustainable energy. Yeah. And I think that's a change from the economics that I studied and the economics that I see now, and I think that's very, very good. Um, I think economics and economists, we need to think again about the discussion on developing or emerging and developed countries. I think there is still a huge gap between the way how we understand and the amount of studies about the developed world and what happens in other regions. An example of that is the Nobel Prize of this year, that has basically forgotten about the rest of the world. And I think this is a call for every person that is studying economics now. Is yes, as a social scientist, you always approach the context that you know. So if you're studying in the US, if you're studying in the Netherlands, as you are, you will try to understand what you know. Yeah, what you live in, the world that you live in, but always try to remember that there is other world, and it's a world that behaves differently from the one that you learn. And that is a call for Latin Americanists, that we always study economics with models from the US or from the UK. And I think it's time that we start to think how to have theory that comes from our region, from an emerging region. Yeah. So I don't know if that is going to happen soon, or if I am. I don't know. I actually don't know if that is going to happen. But I truly hope that we start to think about other regions.
Well, that's really great. And just like the whole conversation, it was really nice to learn and listen with, like, to learn from you and to listen with you, to you. It was really interesting. Thank you for
Okay,
making the
you're
time and
welcome.
for telling all your stories.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation, Julika. Thank you so much, because I really like the rethinking economics, and I think that we are right on time to start thinking economics completely different from what we have learned in our economics departments. And it's challenging to talk about my research and my career. Is quite challenging. Uh, yeah, because sometimes, and you will see with you when in your future, you will see that sometimes you don't realize the amount of things that you have done. So and how your research is always about something that you are seeing and that you want, that you're curious about. So yes, thank you so much for this chance to talk.